It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guests this week are Matt Ingebretson and Jake Weisman. They're two young writers and comedians who created and star in the new Comedy Central show, Corporate. Matt and Jake play two junior executives in training at a giant multinational. They're also named Matt and Jake. Their characters are kind of floating around in corporate purgatory. They have just enough power and money to keep working there, not enough to make any real impact. So when a crisis hits, Matt and Jake agree to take on all the work, all the blame, and of course, they get none of the credit. It's also got a great supporting cast: Lance Reddick, who played Cedric Daniels on The Wire, Aparna, Nancherla, one of my favorite comics, Vaughn, another of my favorite comics. To call Corporate an office comedy is technically true. It's got a little bit of the gallows humor that you see in Office Space or in Ricky Gervais's The Office. The show's characters all have this kind of fluorescent glow, like they're in a morgue. There's a little bit of Terry Gilliam in there, too. But Corporate goes beyond your standard office drone nihilism to talk about deeper stuff: capitalism, art, the meaninglessness of life. Like I said before, nobody on the show is happy. They're all filling an empty void. So why not just stare into the void and crack some jokes? Here's what I mean. In this scene from the show, Jake and Matt are in the boardroom waiting for a morning meeting of executives to kick off. They're hungry, and on the table in front of them is a big plate of bagels and donuts.
Do you think we're going to get to eat anything today?
Don't count on it. There's a rigid food hierarchy here. Executives get first pick, then junior executives, then us, the junior executives in training.
$500 billion corporation, and they never have enough bagels for everyone.
Why didn't you eat breakfast before work?
I didn't have time. I hit the snooze button 15 times this morning, which is a new record that I'm actually kind of proud of. Did you eat anything?
No, I'm trying to watch my figure. I want to have a hot body because I'm tired of developing my personality.
Yeah, I've been there.
Matt Ingebretson and Jake Weisman, welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you guys on the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
This is one of the bleakest television programs I've ever watched.
I take that as a big compliment. Thank you very much. I'm trying to bring more sadness to TV, less mirth.
Yeah.
There is the workplace is the either first or second most popular venue for a television sitcom.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? After The Family Home.
That's right. Or a bar.
But usually the premise of a sitcom is that this family-like group goes through faces an outside challenge, typically an outside challenge or a structural challenge. Something crazy happens. They have to make a casserole for the boss who's coming over.
Yes.
Then, through a series of humorous events, it resolves itself, and it turns out okay. Everything ends up being fine.
We had no idea that's what a sitcom was supposed to be. We made a lot of mistakes making this sitcom.
I just think that most programs about the workplace are a form of escapism. So people go to work and then they come home, and the idea is they don't want to see their actual life reflected. They want some better version of what they're going through to be entertained by. But we always felt that comedy should be a catharsis, and that, I don't want to pretend that life is better than it is. I want the recognition that my life is bad, so therefore it feels valid. It's and that's funny. I just think it's funny we spend our whole lives working and we're not that happy. It's really funny. Yeah. Undeniably, it's funny.
Oh, so I'm not allowed to deny that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the ground rules we've agreed to?
We know we're right.
We know what you actually feel about your life.
Are there things that you had seen previously that made you think, oh, this can work? This is different from Mary Tyler Moore, but this can work.
Mostly in movies, I think. Movies like Network or
Dr. Strangelove. I mean, I think we're not necessarily thinking about it as an office comedy. We're more thinking of it as a satire. So I think most comedies, even if it's not at a specific workplace, it kind of is at a workplace. I mean, most shows are at some workplace. It doesn't even matter what it is. It could be a baseball team. They're still at work. But I think we're just more coming from a way to satirize what's going on at the workplace, but also in American culture and society, politically and socially. And I think the working in an office under the umbrella of a huge corporate giant is our way to talk about what's going on, how we see it with Americans. And it just happens to be in an office, and it turns out that if you satirize stuff, it's pretty sad.
Let's hear a little bit more from the show. This is a scene that I really loved. Aparna Nancherla, who's a wonderful stand-up comic and writer, plays the HR director, Grace, in the company. And this is the opening of an episode where she is basically leading a group of executives through an HR profile of their employees.
The average employee has 7.8 suicidal thoughts per day, 18 panic attacks a year, and wonders once an hour, every hour, why this is happening to them. And that concludes my presentation on how Hampton Deville employees cope with the pain of being alive.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Should we talk next steps?
First step, let us never speak of this again.
Yes, that's right. That's really the only step.
Do you feel like your job in this show is basically to identify and name that feeling that was just described?
I think so. Yeah, the show came a lot out of the feelings that we had working any job that we've had, both jobs that we hated and jobs that we, on the surface, enjoyed. The sort of dread that you felt coming in every day and confusion about why you felt that dread and why you were there at all. And we wanted to just make a show where we talked about that and tried to make it entertaining.
Yeah, and I've always just kind of been obsessed with the things that people are feeling but don't feel they're allowed to say. Remember when I was younger, I saw American Beauty, and I don't necessarily stand by that movie now, but I was like, yeah, that's more what I grew up in the suburbs. That's more what the suburbs are like than what I've seen portrayed in the suburbs, like with old TV shows. And so I think, to me, the fact that people aren't saying something they're feeling is funny. And if you're thinking about death and all that stuff, it's like, isn't everyone thinking about that? But you're not allowed to say it. So I think saying it is just funny in itself because you're not supposed to for some reason.
I think that something you said, which is that even when you are in a superficially happy and positive job, you come to realize that, when you were in a terrible job, you had blamed your existential dread on the terrible job, which is not unreasonable. But then you get a pretty good job. I mean, you guys have your own television show. Here I am. I've got my own show on NPR.
And good for you.
Yeah, way to go.
Thank you very much. And you realize, oh, no, existential dread is the human condition.
Yes, exactly. I'm also just think it's funny that it's statistically impossible that we're alive. It's amazing that we're alive. We made it through our dad's genitals into our mother's parts, and we're alive. We've made it full term. Oh my God, we're existing for like 5 minutes in the scope of the whole universe, and we're just so sad the entire time, or for a lot of it. And that's undeniably hilarious, and it's scary and weird, and you kind of can't escape the feeling, but that's just what it is.
Jake, besides existential dread, what else is on your list of undeniably hilarious things?
I love cats. That's a really good question. What's really funny? I think the movie Airplane's really good.
Yeah, Airplane is really funny.
Yeah, I think it's really funny.
Yeah.
It really holds up. It's
really
amazing. That was
holds
a long time ago now. That's like 40 years ago now.
Because it's
so funny.
It's so funny because it's a drama that is, it's a silly drama. And I think that's what we tried to do, is like stuff that's played very straight, that's just ridiculous. That's what I think the funniest stuff is. Because life is this complete drama, but it really should just be funny because it's ridiculous that you're alive, so you shouldn't take it that seriously. And I think the fact that it's a drama and then punctuated with these moments where you remember, oh yeah, I mean, whatever, is the funniest thing possible.
Is it weird to pitch a show about the alienating force of late period capitalism to an anonymous multinational corporation such as Viacom?
Yes.
You know what, honestly, I think helped us, because one thing we're pitching the show, and the show we're pitching is, this is a show about how you all hate your jobs at a corporation, and they're all like, oh, that's definitely correct. Yeah, you're 100% correct. And some of the guys that we pitched the show to, the characters Matt and I play in the show are kind of like their jobs, like they're middlemen to some degree. And I think that they completely related to it. So it actually helped us. And I think if a corporation is going to be evil and do whatever it does, they might as well have a sense of humor.
Why are your characters junior executives and not common working men or foolish big shots?
I think most of the time when you're at a company, you're rarely at the top of it, or even if you're at the top, there's someone above you still. And so your experience is always being pressurized between the people above you and then the people below you, and you become crushed in the weight of that. And so we wanted the characters to have no agency in the company.
But also, to me, there's something pretty real about having a job that has just enough money that you'd never want to go back to not having that much money. And so junior executives in training, like, there's some hope for them, but that's not real. Like, there's just the sense of hope, and they're kind of just trapped. They have enough money to where they're trapped, but they're not happy with where they are. It's kind of like junior executives in training is sort of just like, what is that? It doesn't mean anything. It just means you have a job where theoretically you're better than some people, but you're pretty much worse off than everyone. And there's just sort of an existentialist, Beckett-esque feeling to it, where they're never going anywhere.
A lot of the darkest comedies on television are still fundamentally life-affirming because they're about friendship. If I think of like, a wonderful show that's been on for 10 or 12 years now, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? There's no more distressingly themed program than Always Sunny in Philadelphia. In every given episode, they're pretty emotionally committed to something horrible. But ultimately, the grand theme of the program is, for some reason, these people love each other. They don't even really have to explain why or how. It's really just that they love each other. And so you're like, well, I guess I love these people because they have friends or something. And I wonder if you chose not to make a show about two guys who love each other when it could have been two bleak guys. Your characters relate to each other reasonably, but it's not about you guys loving each other.
It sometimes feels manipulative to me that when shows do that, they're extremely dark and they're like, but at least we have friends. And it's like, maybe that's just what people want to watch. But in general, I guess to me, I've always thought of comedy as not necessarily trying to manipulate people. Like, there is that type of comedy, but in general, it's like, we're just trying to reflect what happens in the world or how we see it. What we think is funniest is that friendship doesn't save this all. Like, we're all just trying our best. But I don't know, even living in LA, I just feel like everyone's so scared and sad all the time. And they all feel very alone. And I just think that's so funny. And like, even if you have allies, you're still stuck there alone, desperately hoping that your life turns out okay. And I know that sounds dark, but I truly think it's hilarious. And I don't think there's any reason why we need sort of the falseness of friendship or certain like music cues to come in for people to watch. If it's funny, it's funny. And I think they'll like us for being funny.
Let's take a listen to another clip from the show Corporate, which was co-created by and stars my guests Matt Ingebretson and Jake Weisman. Matt just BCC'd his superiors in an email. He was supposed to CC them, and his bosses, John and Kate, come in and they knock on the door, and they enter his kind of sad, dark cave in which he works, and they question his work ethic.
If you can't manage your emotions, Matt, what makes you think you're qualified to manage people at this company?
Honestly, I don't know.
Oh.
I never really saw myself here. I mean, after college, I volunteered for a program teaching underprivileged kids because I wanted to help people. But then one of the students stabbed me, and the school was pretty dirty, and I realized I wasn't cut out for it. So I moved back in with my parents, which I'm pretty sure led to them getting a divorce because that's what they told me happened. Then I worked a series of jobs that eventually landed me here, where I'm just a cog in a soulless corporate machine, and I'm not...
Okay, well, just make sure that you CC both John and I on all work emails. It's a simple mistake, but it's just important to follow protocol.
Yes. Jake, question. Why do you think it's okay to come into work with your shirt untucked?
Because life is meaningless and nothing we do matters.
Okay, great.
Have a great day, you
Thanks,
two.
guys.
Yes.
Have either of you guys had real jobs before?
Yeah, I had a lot of, when I moved out here to Los Angeles, I had a lot of day jobs in marketing and social media at major entertainment corporations that I won't name because I might want to work there again someday. But that scene was drawn specifically from a job that I had working in social media where my boss would interrogate me about my reasoning behind mistakes I had made. And the reason I made the mistakes were just because I was barely paying attention to what was happening around me, and work felt like an out-of-body experience to me. But there were many times where she would call me into her office and ask me why I had made a mistake. And it was harrowing and just felt like I was outside of time and space. One time she lectured me about it for so long, I think about half an hour, to the point where I had to finally be like, Celeste, you're hurting my feelings right now. I just felt like I had no agency. I think I was 22 and just didn't know what I was doing. And so that's kind of where that came from.
This isn't really like the ideal time to be launching an entertainment property where regular dudes represents two white dudes in middle age. Mm-hmm. Did you think about that as you were developing the show? Like, what does it mean that, I mean, I presume you were developing it for yourselves and your two white dudes. Mm-hmm. But did you think about what does this mean and like how do we respond to this in making this show?
Yeah, I think that we are extremely aware that we are two white dudes and wanted to, I think one of the goals was to portray what it feels like and what it is to be a white dude at this point in time, which is very conflicted, and you're often, kind of aware that you are a part of a history of not being a good person. And so we wanted to be a little more honest about that. I think a lot of shows about straight white dudes are just about party culture or getting stoned, and that is the crux of it, and we wanted it to be a little more complicated and nuanced than that.
Yeah, it's confusing because we don't want to hurt anyone, but we're still just trying to have a career. For the first season, we hired 3 female writers, which we thought would help, and definitely helps. It really is important to have as many different types of people in the writer's room as possible. Sometimes there's little stuff that you don't realize you just take for granted that is not other people's experience. So I think the way to combat that potential problem of having 2 straight white guys as the leads is to get as many diverse voices as you can before you film it. Yeah, that's the best you can do.
Are there any particular things that you feel like you gained by doing that?
I think sometimes you think of the funny thing first and you come up with a funny idea, and then when you explore that a little further, you might realize, oh, that's funny for the wrong reason. And it often helps to have people who have had experiences to help you tailor those ideas to not be, backwards or wrong in some way or another.
Let's hear another clip from Comedy Central's corporate. My guests are the co-creators and stars of the program. This episode has... it's called Trademark. It's about a guy named Trademark who is a sort of Banksy-like, quote-unquote, street artist. And Matt's character, Matt, has started creating this craft beer. And Trademark, the artist, wants to turn it into a mass-market, gentle lager. So this is Jake talking to Matt and saying why he thinks that he shouldn't do this.
There's something I've been hiding from you, but it's time you knew. Take a look.
What is this?
It's my tag. I used to be a major street artist, back when street art still meant something.
You're Entrop?
It's entropy. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That part of my life is over. You spend years fighting corporations, and then finally you have to admit to yourself, you love Southwestern egg rolls.
Wow. I'm sorry I said you weren't an artist. This is technically art, if you want to use a really broad definition of what art is.
Look, Matt, I'm in favor of selling out and making as much money as humanly possible. But if you're going to sell out, you shouldn't do it because Trademark told you to. You should do it for your own reasons. Or for money and fame.
Do you guys remember what the art looks like that they're looking at?
It's a stick figure drawing of... It's like a bad political cartoon of a large, giant stick figure stomping on tiny human beings and an arrow pointing at the giant stick figure that says capitalism.
I think it's a society.
That says society. And
my notes indicate that there is a bubble that says, I'm Mr. Corporation.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Who is stepping on society? I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Can I run a theory by you that I have that I'm not 100% sure of, but maybe you guys have some feedback? Please do. Is Banksy the worst?
I think he's the worst.
Okay.
And I think, but also, again, I think that's because of capitalism. I think, the thing about Banksy that people don't realize is it's a brand. Like, is he really helping world peace by, like, putting, figures on walls in the Middle East? Like, do you really care? You're asking for world peace? What does that mean? Like, people just buy your art, and it's not his fault, I don't think. Maybe Banksy's a team of people. Who knows what it is? But I just think it's like, there's no way you care about world peace more than you do your bank account. And I just think everyone is forced to become a brand. Everyone's forced to become a CEO of their own thing because capitalism is unforgiving and you need money to survive. You need a lot of it. And we just think he's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and even I think a lot of this episode too is about even if you start with good intentions, if you enter into entertainment or anything on a big enough level in America, it's very difficult not to be co-opted by the system that you're going against. And so I don't know what Banksy's finances look like, but that was, Even if you go live off the grid, that's still a reaction to corporations. You're still living in a world owned by corporations, and there's not much you can do. And again, all you can do is laugh.
When I was a teenager, Shepard Fairey's Andre the Giant pieces were up all over San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And I thought, it's a very interesting kind of deconstruction of the idea of branding. And then, like 3 years later, he started selling pants at Target with that brand on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, like 10 years later, it's like, oh, he's redeemed. He used the techniques of Eastern European political propaganda to make a pretty poster for the first black president.
Exactly. Fighting the system just
Yes.
becomes a brand. Like, it's really tough because there are people who are idealists and we're all trying to do a really good job while we're alive, but you get caught up in your own lives. You have kids, you have things to do, and you're like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll do a commercial. Like what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
There's so few options to be that great a person.
I think too, we're not trying to place a huge amount of judgment. It more is just a commentary of what I think most people go through, which is you hopefully have good intentions to start with, but then end up getting sucked into something that is beyond your control a little bit, or that you don't have a choice and you have to participate in it.
So let's hear some more from Comedy Central's corporate. So Jake and Matt are talking to Grace, the HR director, played by Aparna Nancherla, and it's just water cooler talk.
Who do you think designs these coffee cups?
A failed art student in a massive amount of college debt.
I feel like I never used my communications degree. I mean, I guess I'm talking right now, so that's something.
I majored in English, and that should be illegal.
Hey guys, want to see the latest nightmare I've been living?
I'd love to.
This is HD Whistle. It's an anonymous whistleblowing app developed by HR. If you see someone doing something bad, you find the appropriate category, like embezzlement, and click whistle. And then an upsetting amount of paperwork magically appears on my desk.
Why does it have to make that sound?
I don't know. It reminds me of walking by a construction site or any other place men are.
So if the workplace is this alienating of an environment, and despite the fact that I own my company and have 12 employees, I'm not going to dispute that premise. I wonder whether you guys feel like yourselves or comfortable or free from existential burdens when you're in other places.
You mean not at work?
Yeah, at home, at the ball game.
Yeah, I do, but it's always there. I think that is the burden of being someone. If you are a hyper self-aware person, you're always balancing two things in your mind, which is I'm at a baseball game right now and having a lovely time, and I'm going to die someday. And so I think at work those things are amplified because the situation is a little miserable, but I certainly feel that every waking moment.
I think
but not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, it's more like I have a jovial attitude about it where it's like, I'm going to die someday, so I might as well have a great time at this baseball game.
I don't know how you feel, but I think I actually feel, I don't know if happiest is the word, but busiest at work. And so that is great, because if I can find a purpose in work, like I'm creating something, or I'm working towards a future for myself, or helping my bank account, or doing something constructive, work is the most distracting place that I can be, and that's great because it feels productive. And I think in this society, it's like feeling productive is what makes you happiest.
Can we talk about Lance Reddick for a second?
Yes.
He plays your boss on the show, the CEO of the company, Hampton Deville, and he's kind of this intense maniac. So I want to play a little clip of him. This doesn't really need a lot of setup. He's leading a meeting of executives in the corporate boardroom. He is in a bad mood, and he's giving his employees kind of a pep talk.
I want to tell you a story. It's about a shepherd. One day he lost his entire flock. I mean, every single sheep took off except one. So there he is out in the middle of this open field with just one sheep, and what do you think he did? He pulled out a gun, and he blew its brains out. Then, he went out and got himself a real job, because being a shepherd pays. Well, people, that ain't me. Because we are in cattle country, and I am Ben Cartwright, and this is Bonanza.
Lance Reddick is on Bosch, and he's also well known from The Wire.
Yes.
Why did you think that he was funny?
Well, first of all, as I was saying about Airplane, Leslie Nielsen was a dramatic actor, and he played it straight in Airplane, and that's why it's so funny, because he's saying insane things. And Lance Reddick is one of the most gifted, intense actors that has come around the last 30 years. And if you give him things to say about hurricanes and his penis, it's like gonna be funny, because it's said with this like Yale graduate school level of gravitas, and we're just saying dumb things. So we kind of knew that, but But
there's a difference between somebody who, there's a certain extent to which you can write for somebody with a lot of gravitas and just write against their gravitas, and they'll go up there and have a beautiful voice like Lance does, and sell it. But there are additional elements to comic acting that go beyond simply playing emotional truth, generally speaking, that are like rhythmic and, that kind of thing.
And Lance, I think, is someone who is largely known for his dramatic acting, but is very funny and likes being funny. And so he's able to mix in his dramatic acting chops, but with his own sensibility and understanding of the comedy that I think makes it work.
There were also two other things. One is when he was in graduate school for acting, he did do a lot of comedies. We didn't know that until we cast him, but once he started getting typecast as this like intense, hard-boiled cop, he kind of stayed there, and people only saw him as that. But he was in a Funny or Die video, I think called Toys R Me, where it is like a 5-minute comedy video, and he's so funny in it, and he's playing a very similarly intense person, but saying absurd stuff. And we just knew, like, if we can get an actor from The Wire to say dumb stuff, and he's been in a comedy video, like, it was honestly the best thing we've ever done, is casting that guy.
Yeah, you should watch, if anything else, watch the show to see Lance Reddick.
Well, I met that dude backstage at an NPR Ask Me Another show maybe 6 months ago. And, I walked into the green room, and I was like, oh, that dude's from The Wire first. That was my first reaction. But then, he has such the bearing of the characters that he plays in real life. He's a very convivial guy.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least was backstage when I was chatting with him.
Yeah.
But I found it almost distressing to exchange pleasantries with a man who spoke in that manner.
Yes. It is confusing to talk to him because on camera he's so intense and intimidating, but off camera he's a great listener and kind and thoughtful, and it's weird balancing those things in your head as you're speaking to him.
It's also hard to not ask him just about The Wire. So, that kind of stuff.
I spent the entire time focusing on not asking him about The Wire. I'm like, I'm going to talk to this guy about Bosch. I'm going to talk to this guy about whether he's heard Ask Me Another before. I'm going to I'm thinking of different things and talk to this guy about how he appears to be younger than me, despite probably being 20 years older than me. Like how I'm going to ask this guy about what it's like to look at things so clearly.
Absolutely,
apparently.
Yes.
But then right at the end, as I left, I accidentally called him by his character from The Wire's name. Literally on my way out the door, like, goodbye.
That's really funny. Yeah, I think Lance loves to goof around and he loves silliness. I think people think because people were in dramas, they're very serious people, but what a relief for him to get to say silly things. I mean, it's like, I think it's just fun for him.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you manage the world of this show, because I think it's so interesting that it is in these hallways and offices where the lights are always at 65% and the walls are always about to cave in.
Mm-hmm.
But then you want to go on these crazy adventures within this profoundly claustrophobic world.
One thing we're pretty obsessed with is the fact that, you know, humans used to live in the woods, and then we decided that agriculture was a good idea, and so we built all these buildings, and now we go to work in these ridiculous buildings. And I think there is a feeling of claustrophobia, and like it's like the wrong thing. Like, why are we in suits sitting in cramped spaces, sitting at desks that are giving us hurting our backs? But the imagination that we could be in the woods or that we're not supposed to be here is kind of what gets us through everything. And I think we have wild imaginations and we just like thinking that way. But the reality is society is trying to constrict us to these boxes to define us that way and control us. But really, we just... whenever I'm in an office, it feels trippy to me. It's crazy that I'm spending my life in this tiny little place, and all I'm thinking about is everything else I could be doing. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk, like made it feel like it's like, imagine if this didn't have to be like this.
I think, too, that, I mean, a lot of the visual aesthetic was built in from the beginning, but was then executed very well by Pat Bishop, who directed every episode. And we wanted to, I think The Office has been explored in a lot of different ways, but we wanted to explore it a little more visually and try to represent the emotions you feel in an office space a little more, almost like a mushroom trip, essentially. I think that there's a psychedelic nature to the way that our show feels. We interviewed a production designer early on who described reading the script as though he was reading like a weird mushroom trip. And I think that we kept that in mind, where we take small moments and blow them out in a way where it allows us to explore it in a little more depth. And so, I think in managing the world, a lot of that was Pat Bishop, our director of photography, Christoph Lanzenberg, and Melanie Pizes-Jones, our production designer, wrangled that in.
Have you guys had experiences taking mushrooms?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, we've come up with some ideas for episodes while on mushrooms. Yeah. And so I think mushrooms are wrongly classified as a drug. I think they're one of the few times that I'm truly optimistic and thankful.
They're actually a topping.
Yes, they're a topping. I think that I don't do any drugs or drink or anything, but I will do mushrooms, and I've done acid once, and those things are more just helpful. They're more therapeutic. They remind me of why the world is good. And it allows me to look at really simple things like plants and be like, oh my God, plants. That's incredible. And it makes me think of the whole history of the universe to how we got here. And that's sort of how we wanted to feel. It's like, how did we get in this office? This is crazy that we're here. No, really, it's crazy. Look at how crazy it is.
Yeah. And to everyone listening, please do them responsibly, but we would highly encourage you to do mushrooms at some point in your life because it is a therapeutic, beautiful experience.
It does help you see that life is good.
I've never done mushrooms before.
I think you should.
It's not really a drug. You can't really be addicted to them, I don't think. It'd be pretty hard, and it truly, if you have depression, there's a lot of studies that say it can be helpful. And it, again, a flower is beautiful, but when you see it through the lens of a mushroom, you're like, oh, a flower is not just beautiful, it's everything. And that sounds ridiculous, but it has helped me tremendously. And as a writer, it just allows me to see the beauty in the banal.
So let's listen to one more scene from Corporate. And my guests are the creators and stars of that show on Comedy Central. In this episode, an insensitive tweet about a natural disaster has kind of threatened the whole corporate structure of the company. They're trying to figure out what to do. And the two of you guys are sent to figure out who sent this tweet. and you're walking through the halls of Hampton Deville, the multinational corporation in question, and it's very gray and dim. You're just kind of catching fleeting glimpses of people sitting in the cubicles. One person's playing solitaire. One person's sort of blankly eating a piece of pink cake. And this is what we hear.
Look at these people. Is everyone at this company clinically depressed?
Everyone here is hanging by a thread. It could snap at any moment.
These were all children once. Happy, innocent children. And now look at them. How did this happen?
They're all just trying to fill the void.
The void?
You know, the emptiness that exists inside all of us.
Oh, right, of course. The void.
Oh, right, of course, the void. I forgot about the void.
Has having your own television program the kind of unlikeliest outcome of starting an entertainment career shoveled anything into the void?
You know, it's interesting because it's wonderful and our lives are better now. So there's no question about that. And I think if you have a brand that is based in sort of depression or sadness, if you do start to succeed at all, it is compromised. But luckily, the entertainment business fluctuates so much that you always have too much anxiety. So you can still access that horrible feeling even when you're successful that it's all going to go away. But yeah, I think, if we get a season 2, it's all going to be about how happy we are.
Have you added anything over the course of this interview to your list of the incontrovertibly funny?
Oh, my God. Well, I guess what I will say...
So far, just to recap, we had Airplane.
Oh, right.
And the recognition of the
the
darkness at the core of all our lives.
I don't know if there's
acknowledgement maybe would be the better word.
Yeah. I find this location that we're talking in to be very funny. It feels like we're in the hull of a ship, and you do look like you belong on a ship. You have a beard, a beard that looks like it's been blown by the winds of the Baltic Sea, and you're gonna tell us that our father was killed and that you're taking us to a faraway land or something like that.
I'm also wearing the pants of a Ukrainian pirate.
Yeah, yes. I was gonna say the way you dress,
like a contemporary Ukrainian pirate.
That's right.
Yeah,
a very
really
hip,
not a historical one.
Yes. I guess what I'm finding funny is that how much better you dress than me and how much better I could be doing. And like knowing that I just don't know how to be a man.
Yeah.
But you do.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
I mean it well.
Matt, Jake, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Bullseye. It was really great to get to talk to you, and I really love the show.
Thanks for having us.
Your show.
Matt Ingebretson and Jake Weisman. They're comedians. They also have a television show. It's called Corporate. You can see it Wednesdays at 10, 9 Central on Comedy Central or streaming on the Comedy Central website. It is very funny and very bleak. Don't say I didn't warn you.